The 2019 Formula 1 season is over and the 2020 season seems so far away. The winter can be a little bit flat in the world of Formula 1. However, I just thought I would tickle your Formula 1 senses just a little bit today and take the opportunity to talk about Mr. Daniel Ricciardo, the Honey Badger, and his first year in yellow. It was such a surprise when he made the announcement he was going to leave Red Bull, a team he had been with for so long, a team or a company even, he'd been with even longer than that. He left in the summer and moved into the midfield, a really dangerous place for a Formula 1 driver's career because so quickly, a couple of bad results, a poor car can just take you off the grid instantly. But Ricciardo took the move. He went for the gutsy and brave decision. Has it paid off? That's what I'd really like to talk about today, because we had some incredible stories throughout 2019. The Ferrari inter-team battle, Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel. We had Bottas 2.0, the porridge master, who tried, bless him, to try and build a title fight up against Lewis Hamilton. We had a resurgent McLaren, and yet Daniel Ricciardo at Renault, to me, was just super interesting. Where I'd like to start is why he moved, because this is definitely a topic for debate and a topic that I think most people have their own unique opinion of. The most popular one I see is the Max Verstappen effect, is what I'm going to call it in today's video. And Max Verstappen, since joining the team back in the Spanish Grand Prix of 2016, had slowly been getting better and embedding himself within that Red Bull team even more and more. And it was really getting to a stage where Verstappen, despite being the younger driver, despite being the less experienced driver, was becoming the number one driver. And that's definitely something that must have gone into Ricciardo's thinking. Red Bull also, behind the scenes, were probably starting to think, we need to be looking after Verstappen more. He's got age on his side. He seems to be a little bit quicker on a Saturday and a Sunday. Maybe that's the direction we have to put our resources into. And that makes total sense, 100% sense for Red Bull to do that. And whilst I think the Verstappen effect was definitely an implication into why Ricciardo moved on, I don't think it's the main one that he moved on, personally anyway. I think Ricciardo needed a change. He's obviously a big character in the world of Formula 1, and things at Red Bull definitely have begun to get a little bit stale. Gone are the days where they win tens of millions of Grand Prix over multiple seasons. Gone are the days where they're in a real chance for a championship. Of course, Mercedes have won every season since the hybrid era. However, that does not mean they went completely unchallenged. Ferrari, on multiple occasions in the hybrid era, have really given them a run for their money. But Red Bull, it's never quite got to that stage. It's never quite been a season where, yes, we can go on and win this. 2019, perhaps, at the midway point, was the only real time I can remember in the hybrid era where anybody thought that potentially a Red Bull driver could go on and win the championship, and that was only a bit of false hope during Max Verstappen's brilliant upturn of form before the summer break. Apart from that, Red Bull have mostly been third and have settled for second on a few occasions as well. But that hunger and desire for a championship, whilst it must be there, results haven't really turned into anything special. And for a driver like Ricciardo, who has proved on multiple occasions he can win Grand Prix, and not only can he win Grand Prix, he can do it in style, he can overtake, he can do the business, you gotta understand that after a while, that's going to get frustrating. That's going to get to the point where you're thinking, well, I'm never going to win a championship. Even if I'm good enough, I'm not going to have the opportunity to show it. And I think 2014 to 2018, 5 seasons with the team, is long enough for the team to turn around their fortunes, to turn around their pace of the car. But what other options were out there? Of course, Ferrari have Sebastian Vettel and had Charles Leclerc on their books, but also Kimi Raikkonen at the time, so there's not really space there. What about Mercedes? Well, Valtteri Bottas was struggling at the end of 2018, but even then, it's more likely the team would bring Esteban Ocon back into the fold. And of course, they ended up keeping Valtteri Bottas for the 2019 season. So what other options are there? Well, I don't think many of us would have expected the resurgence of McLaren in 2019. But also it's important to remember, McLaren are a customer team to Renault. And it would make sense that the works team, the factory team in Renault, should be the lead Renault team. So it makes sense that Ricciardo would move to Renault in the hope that for 2021 they could really build a good car. But also the team were riding a really good bit of form themselves. Ever since returning to Formula 1 in 2016, we're getting better and better each single season, going higher up the constructors' standings, and it was supposedly 2019 was the year they were going to start to get podiums. There were opportunities, but the pace was definitely not a car worthy to be on the podium. Definitely in a bland, boring Grand Prix with no incidents. That wasn't going to happen, but the plan was podiums. But I feel the vision for Ricciardo was 2021. But not only that, and this is the key reason for me, is that by moving to Renault, that opens doors for 2021. Now, you'll see on this very channel over the next few weeks, I want to do a video discussing contracts for 2021, mainly because it's super cool and super interesting, but also most of the drivers are out of contract for 2020, so for 2021, it's pretty much free-for-all. Whoever can get in the best cars, it's fair game. Of course, there's young driver programs and all that malarkey, but for the most part, most of the drivers have a bit of wiggle room for 2021. Now, it's easier to move from a midfield team in a struggling car to a top team than it is to move from a top team to another top team. So I've always held the belief that Ricciardo, by moving into the midfield, frees up his options a bit for 2021. If a Mercedes seat does become available, if a Ferrari seat does become available, it's easier to move from Renault to Ferrari than it is to move from Red Bull to Ferrari. But even that argument is a little bit wishy-washy, considering Sebastian Vettel was able to do that. But that involved a lot of money. Potentially wouldn't involve as much money if contracts were up and drivers were able to move as their own will, if that makes sense. Anyway, he did move to Renault. No matter why he moved to Renault, he did do it. What were his goals? What are his goals? Whether you believe that it's only for a part-time fix to move to Renault to eventually move on, whether you believe he moved to Renault in the hope that the 2021 car is going to be super good and do what Mercedes did in the hybrid era, what were his goals for 2019? Of course, that first race of the season, his home Grand Prix, so much pressure on the lad, so much pressure. Didn't even get to turn one, his front wing fell off. And already you're starting to think, oh my God, this season isn't quite going to be what everyone was hoping it to be. And finishing in the top 10 in the standings isn't bad at all. Finishing fourth in Monza is definitely not bad at all. Qualifying fourth in Canada is great. But no podiums, as advertised over winter testing during the winter break 1 year ago. That was the big story. Of course, the year prior, Hülkenberg alongside Carlos Sainz had got fourth in the constructors. With Honda now partnering Red Bull, that seemed to be an issue with potential teething problems. That never happened. McLaren, they got good for some reason. Don't know why that was, but they decided to show up despite having inexperienced drivers in Lando Norris. And Sainz, who definitely didn't have as much experience as Alonso, I don't think anyone expected them to be as good as they were. Hülkenberg and Ricciardo, for me, is a really strong lineup. And for me, the issues within that team definitely were not down to the drivers. There were mistakes from Ricciardo, there were mistakes from Hülkenberg. Ricciardo had a bit of a reverse issue in Baku, went a little bit deep into the corner while trying to overtake Danny Kvyat, then reversed into the side of him. It was a little bit messy. And I think over the course of 2019, Ricciardo was trying to drive that Renault car like the Red Bull car. Of course, he'd been in that Red Bull car for many years, so it's understandable. I would say quite quickly, he got the grasps of it. And actually, by the end of the season, for the most part, we got that old Ricciardo back. Super late on the brakes, cheeky overtakes, spicy overtakes, just as we like him. But the car was never really in a position to claim a podium. Of course, the best chances in 2019, if you're in that midfield to get a podium, would have been in Germany. That incredible German Grand Prix. Hülkenberg had his chance, but sadly crashed out of the race. But where was Daniel Ricciardo? Well, if you don't remember, the engine blew up. The engine, totally not his fault, out of the race. And that's definitely one of those Grand Prix where you really fancy a driver like Ricciardo to make the difference. All the money Renault spent on him, that's the kind of chance where you think, yeah, the money's worth it. But he never got a chance to prove it. Likewise with Brazil. However, Brazil was a mistake on Ricciardo's own half. He made contact with Kevin Magnussen early in the Grand Prix, had to do a front wing change, but even after that, even after being a whole lap down, ended up P6. And actually, when you look at the season as a whole, you look at races like Silverstone, when you even look at races like Brazil, that perhaps shouldn't have been Renault's best circuit, there were still some really big points hauled from Daniel Ricciardo. It was just missing that podium. And for sure, that weekend in Monza was the icing on the cake, almost. There wasn't quite a cherry on top, but the icing on the cake, if that makes sense, because the podium wasn't there. But a 4th and 5th place, that's a real statement of intent from Renault. They just couldn't have the consistency across the season. A circuit also with super long straights, Baku. Arguably a few more walls than Monza. They were out in Q1. The cars were awful that weekend. How is that possible to be so bad in Baku, so good in Monza? It doesn't quite make sense. And Renault definitely found themselves tripping over their own feet in 2019. 2020, I feel, is a bit of an unknown. As much as 2021 is definitely an unknown, 2020 is as well. Because are we going to see a season where all of the teams give up? They say, right, we'll just keep our 2019 car and work on 2020. Or will we see a few teams say, this is a brilliant opportunity to go up the table a little bit more, to potentially get a bit more money, and then work super hard on 2021. Also, depends on how early teams give up on this season for 2021. It wouldn't surprise me if teams like Williams and Haas already gave up on next season, or already are keeping an eye on 2021. Likewise with the big dogs. Renault have come out this very week, and said that 2021, they're the team in the lead. Now, definitely take that with a pinch of salt, but it proves that 2020, no one knows what's going to happen. But it wouldn't surprise me if it stayed very similar to 2019, with the 3 teams at the front, the midfield, and then whatever you call Williams. Sorry, Williams fans. Always got to get my dig in somewhere. So, potentially, a podium could be on the cards for Ricciardo next year. But this is a driver looking for wins. He's not looking for podiums, 3rd place. Yes, it would be lovely to score a 3rd place, Renault's first podium since returning to Formula 1. But that's not what they want. That's not what Ricciardo wants. And then becomes the question, what happens in 21? What happens if there is a contract on the line for Mercedes? If there is a contract for Ferrari, what does he do then? Will Red Bull come calling back? Of course, they've had issues with Gasly, and Albon, whilst has been impressive, still needs to really pick up a few of his own podiums in the first half of 2020 if I think he really wants to keep his own seat. So maybe Red Bull will ask for him to come back. That would be a really interesting story and dynamic. I think Ricciardo has got a big season on his hands next year. I think Renault also, multiple question marks all of the time it seems at the moment, whether they're even going to commit long term to Formula 1. Recent statements suggest yes, if they're really going to push for 2021, that suggests to me probably going to stick around till 2025 at the earliest. To me anyway. They've left Formula E, yeah, that makes sense. But for Ricciardo, a driver who's not young, he's on the wrong side of 30 for a Formula 1 driver, does it make sense he stays at Renault for the rest of his career? Does it make sense he moves to Ferrari? Does it make sense that he takes a complete gamble with a team like McLaren, like a team like Racing Point? A lot of question marks, not a lot of answers, and that's what's brilliant about a Formula 1. But here's my thoughts. Ricciardo's a brilliant driver. Ricciardo is a fantastic personality, off track, on track, but to bring someone like him into the team is brilliant. Look at what's happened at McLaren in 2019. A lot of their success, I personally believe, is down to that fresh air, that fresh personality brought by both Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz and the dynamic they've brought to the team. And I think Ricciardo definitely can do that to a team. Of course, next year, he's going to be partnered with Esteban Ocon. That's a whole new relationship, a whole new dynamic we have never seen in Formula 1. Ocon himself has got his own agenda for what he wants to prove for the future. It's going to be interesting. I think a team like Ferrari, if Sebastian Vettel leaves, Ricciardo is the prime candidate. For a lot of these teams, he brings that experience. He brings that race-winning experience, the personality that I've just banged on about for another 20 minutes. He also brings a bit of flair. And sponsors, and I know it's money and marketing, and some of you hate it when I talk about that, but money talks in Formula 1. And whilst Ricciardo is not a cheap driver, there's no cheap drivers in Formula 1, but the money he brings to a team, the atmosphere he brings is priceless. So I think if a team comes knocking, I think he should move. I think Renault has proved in 2019 that they can get things wrong. They have proved that their future is a little bit in the balance, whether they stay or go. But then again, maybe that's the press. Maybe that's just the story that they push out, so then they can just surprise everyone in 2021. I always say, you never know what's happening behind closed doors in Formula 1, and we will never know. To me, Ricciardo should move to a Mercedes or Ferrari in 2021. There might not be the option, so then what does he do? I'm stuck myself. But his year this season, his first year in yellow, was it the dream season? No, of course it wasn't the dream season. A P4, a couple of points finishes over the season, well, more than a couple, a handful, shall we say, of points finishes over the season is okay. It's nothing spectacular. But was he awful? No. Did he beat his teammate? Yes. Has he pushed his teammate out of Formula 1? Arguably. Sort of. I still think it's unfair that Hülkenberg's leaving, but sort of. I think he's made the right decision, in hindsight. I think the Verstappen effect would have really hurt his career. I think that constant breakdowns of the car and breakdowns within the team, personally, relationships, isn't going to do a driver any favour. I think he got out at the right time. I think he moved to the right team. So personally, I think it's been alright. I can't say it's been fantastic. I can't say it's been the best switch of all time like Hamilton to Mercedes was. But then, he's only been there a season. I need to give him a little bit more time. But I still think this whole story is super, super interesting. So I might do another one of these next year. I don't know. Anyway, that's my piece. Hopefully it was I don't think it was structured, was it? Anyway, Formula 1 ramblings in the winter. What's not to love? If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that like button to let me know if you like this kind of content. Feel free to subscribe if you are new, if you've made it this far and you're new. Well done, welcome to the team if you do choose to click that subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the winter, kind of. Anyway, hopefully I'll be able to keep you up to date in the world of Formula 1, and I hope to see you in the next one.